All right, calm down. No one freak out. We're not canceling anyone. We are going to very maturely discuss some of the subtle sexism in C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia, specifically in Prince Caspian. Recently, I finished Prince Caspian, which is the second book in the Chronicles of Narnia. I am doing a reread. I've read them several times of the Chronicles of Narnia. And what has become apparent in the first two books, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and then Prince Caspian, is a lot of things. But particularly that there is some subtle sexism that I don't remember picking up on as a child. We're not looking to cancel C.S. Lewis. I think actually the views that he expresses in these books would be the majority position in the 1950s, both in England, but generally around the world, and in many places around the world still are. We can examine things in hopes of doing them better in the future without casting off a whole thing. I don't think it is to the point where I would say don't read C.S. Lewis or don't read the Chronicles of Narnia, or that you can't enjoy the story. I do. I actually do have still very much enjoyed the storytelling of these books, and I would still recommend them to most people. But I would have a caveat, and I kind of want to talk about that today because it's not explicit at all times, but there is some pretty implicit stuff that I noticed, especially in Prince Caspian. But let's first back up a little bit to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, because that is where you really start to see this trend. Now, everyone knows probably the story of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. For children, Peter, Edmund, Susan, and Lucy go into Narnia through a wardrobe. It is a world that is always in winter, but there's no Christmas because the White Witch is ruling evilly over this enchanted land where there are fauns and talking animals, and they eventually help save the kingdom, although most of the work is done by Aslan, this magical lion who is the son of the emperor over the sea, and they defeat the White Witch, right? All of that happens. But in the midst of that story, there are some pretty clear signs of the boys, Peter and Edmund, having a more central part of overthrowing evil, or preeminent part, than the women in the story, the girls, Susan and Lucy, even though Lucy has a very important part. It's very passive. One I want to bring your attention to specifically, and that is one of the signs that the White Witch, that her power is failing, is that they meet Father Christmas, Santa Claus, going through Narnia. And he gives gifts to each of the children. And he gives like a sword to Peter, and he gives a horn to Susan that she can call aid to, but also gives her a bow and arrow. And that's where this starts getting interesting. I'm reading from the chapter called The Spell Begins to Break. Susan, Eve's daughter, said Father Christmas, these are for you. And he handed her a bow and a quiver full of arrows and a little ivory horn. You must use the bow only in great need, for I do not mean you to fight in the battle. It does not easily miss. All right. And then Lucy gets her gifts. Lucy gives a small bottle of glass, of what looked like glass, and a small dagger. In this bottle, Father Christmas said, there is a cordial made of the juice of one of the fire flowers that grow in the mountains of the sun. If you or any of your friends is hurt, a few drops will restore them. And the dagger is to defend yourself at great need, for you also are not to be in battle. So like this very specific thing of like women shouldn't go into battle. And Lucy actually objects to this. Why, sir, said Lucy, I think I could be brave enough. So I could fight. That is not the point, he said, but battles are ugly when women fight. And now, here's something for you all. And then he gives them all treats and they move on. It's a very quick thing of like, women shouldn't be in battle. Why? Just because. It's an ugly thing. It's by nature not something that they should do. I think that is, that feels very wrong. That feels very aggressively sort of anti-women. They should be able to fight. They should be able to defend Narnia or their homeland when duty calls. And that's on top of like some other subtle stuff. There's a whole chapter called Peter's First Battle where he kills a wolf, and he is the only one who actively sort of defends and kills someone of the four children. And it is with a sword, obviously. The women, Lucy and Susan, go off into basically the woods and do their own adventure and are not part of the battle, just like Father Christmas says they can't. And there's also the larger subtle thing of like the evil person who's in charge is a woman when a woman is in charge, and the good person, Aslan, is a man who is in charge of all of this. And the emperor, a male title, are the good rulers. Bad ruler women, good ruler men. Now, these are subtle, but I think they're worth talking about, especially as we get into Prince Caspian, where it really started to be apparent. And I will also say Prince Caspian is not really my favorite. In fact, it might be my least favorite of all of the books in Narnia. It's a little bit of like rerunning some of the stuff from Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, while also not having really a lot of interesting new imagery for me. But the four children do return, and there's a couple of very interesting subtle sexism that I think we should talk about. So the children come back. There's this long period where they save a dwarf, and the dwarf tells them all about this guy, Prince Caspian, who is the son of the Telmararians, who are like these humans who have invaded Narnia because it's a long time after the time when the four children were kings. They learn about Prince Caspian, blah, 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 blah. And a lot of the book is like them trying to make their way back to Prince Caspian, where he like has this army of Narnians, and they're trying to fight against the men who are invading Narnia. The Telmarans? I should know. The Telmarines. There we go. Anyway, while they're trying to find Prince Caspian, they stumble upon Aslan. Or at least, like, they think they do. And Lucy particularly starts seeing Aslan and hearing him while the others don't. And there's this one really subtle thing that I just was like, bowled me over when I read it. Let's see if you can catch it. This is in the chapter called The Return of the Lion. They dropped off to sleep one by one, but all pretty quickly. Lucy woke out of the deepest sleep you can imagine with the feeling that the voice she liked best in the world had been calling her name. She thought at first it was her father's voice, but that did not seem quite right. Then she thought it was Peter's voice, but that did not seem to fit either. She did not want to get up, not because she was still tired. On the contrary, she was wonderfully rested, but because she felt so extremely happy and comfortable. She was looking straight up to the Narnian moon when she heard Lucy, came the call again. And then it goes on. Okay, so a couple things there. Lucy, young woman, gets up and hears a voice saying her name. And she says, "It's like my favorite voice in the world." And what are the two examples that Lewis gives of her favorite voices? Her father, and then her elder brother, Peter. And then do you know who it actually turns out to be? Of course, is Aslan. So three male figures of authority that Lucy is joyful to hear and obey. This is like quite clearly sort of the patriarchal mindset, even of folks today, that like God and Jesus, male headship is over things. And then the head of the family is the father, the husband. And then if, you get down into it, it's the firstborn son who is like the higher thing of the family. And in just that just, I don't know, skeeved me out quite a bit, that particular thing of like Lucy hearing the thing she wants most. It's like her father, it's like her brother. No, it's actually just God. A very clear line of how patriarchal societies maintain control is that this is the order of authority. And this is also consistently how Susan is treated, who is older even than Edmund, but she is portrayed all the time as nagging, like these sort of traditional, like negative attributes that are given to women in these elder books. Like she is trying to sound like mother, and she's told to obey. There's one place where Susan says, "Suppose I started behaving like Lucy, I might threaten to stay here when the rest of you are not. I jolly well think I might." And then Trumpkin, who's the dwarf who's with them, says, "Obey the High King, your majesty, and let's be off." There's just like this consistent following that the women do in these novels. And again, the same thing happens in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Susan and Lucy go off someplace. They don't take part in the actual like battle adventure part of the book because Edmund and Peter are doing that. Peter is fighting the king of the Telmarines, and Edmund is his second, and then eventually they take part in the battle, and the women do not. And outside of that, there's all kinds of like subtle things that are said of like one time Peter hugs and kisses somebody, and it says he doesn't, that's not in a girlish way because he's the High King. Like there's like the weird things like that Lewis kind of puts in this that was just off-putting to me when I was reading Prince Caspian. And so like I don't have a specific action I want anyone to take about the Chronicles of Narnia. I just wanted to point out specifically these things in Prince Caspian that are a continuation of some things that happened in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe that makes me uneasy in the Chronicles of Narnia. And specifically, I was thinking, I had this read to me as a child. I remember my dad read to them. I loved them. I really immersed myself in the world. And I don't think I like put together that I was like subtly being taught patriarchy or anything like that. Although the world that I inhabited in evangelicalism does have that. And this sort of lent itself to me. But I was thinking, what if I was reading this to my nieces. And I would want to point these things out. I wouldn't not read the books to them, but I think these are good moments of pointing out how for so long our culture has assumed these things about women, these roles for women, and they're ingrained in us even from children, and that we have to actively push back against that to have a better outcome in the future of what is possible for women and girls, and for men, by the way. This is also a pretty stifling view of what manhood has to be. Just like Peter can't hug and kiss someone without like fearing that it would look girlish, like that is also not a good system. So I think that's why I wanted to make this video, just to point that out, and also hopefully provide a model of like, we can critique these older works that come from a different world than one we live in and try to do better and talk about those while also still appreciating the artistry and some of the beauty of these books. Again, I mostly enjoy these Chronicles of Narnia books. There's some really great moments within them. What do you think of what I've laid out here today? Do you like Prince Caspian? Again, I think it's probably my least favorite Chronicle of Narnia. We'll see. As always, first in, last out.